Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. Okay, so today's video is actually one that I am kind of excited about, and I think that it's going to be really fun, and I had a fun time putting this list together, coming up with books, and yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So this video is all about books that I love with tropes that I hate. So these are books that have tropes in them that I would not ever seek out, that I would probably try to avoid actually, but because either a friend highly recommended it, or maybe it was getting a lot of hype, or it was from an author that I love, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna try that and see what I think. So these are books that I ended up truly loving, and I thought I probably would not work for me. So the first book that I want to mention is The Casanova. This is by T.L. Swan. This book comes out this month in August. I read an arc of this book. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. And the trope that is in this book that I really don't like, that I actively avoid, is an office romance. I hate office romances, you guys. I'm sorry. I know they're so popular. I just hate them. I just don't like them. I hate them. And I specifically hate the dynamic of a boss and his subordinate having a romance. Like, I just don't like that. I don't know why. I just really hate it. It feels gross to me. I don't like it. I just don't like it. So, this book, however, completely worked for me. And that is exactly what this is. This follows the Elliot Miles, and he is the CEO of Miles Media, and it is his romance with Kate, who is his IT manager. So, it's an office romance, it's a boss and subordinate romance, and yeah, it's a big part of their love story is this office environment that they have, and I totally loved this. It completely worked for me. They had great banter, they had great chemistry. I really loved this book, and I was pretty surprised that that dynamic had worked for me so well here, because usually that is one that definitely I will avoid. And if if I ask a friend to pick me books, I'm usually like, okay, anything goes, but please no office romances. I hate them so bad. So I was surprised about that, but I really ended up loving it. So another trope that I will actively avoid and very much do not enjoy reading is like a teenage setting, a high school setting, teenage characters with adult themes or adult content. Like, I don't want to read that. I have teenage kids. I just really struggle reading teenage romances, especially if it's a teenage with an adult. Then I'm just like, I just struggle with that a lot. I don't love it, you know? It's just not for me. I'm not saying it's not for anybody else, but for me, it's just like a big, no, we're not gonna do it. So, Dark Notes, however, by Pam Godwin, completely changed my mind. I absolutely love this book. This is a dark romance. This is a student-teacher romance. The heroine in here is 17. She is in an art school, a school for the arts, and her teacher is a piano teacher, and it is their romance. This has some very heavy themes and some heavy topics. Sexual abuse, sexual assault, and death of a pet. It is pretty heavy in the themes, but it is absolutely beautiful. And the heroine in here seemed so mature for her age because of her life circumstances and things that she had to go through because of her parents, that I totally and completely believed that she would fall for this man. And because of that, I could tell that his feelings for her seemed totally real to me. She didn't seem like a child. There wasn't a huge age gap here, but it was student teacher, and I don't know, I just loved this book so much. I felt like it was beautifully done, it was beautifully handled. It's one of my favorite books of all time, and I just loved it. It was a trope that I didn't think it would work for me, and it totally did here. I loved it. Okay, another trope that I usually really don't like, or that I thought it was the main reason I didn't pick this book up, and that was a single point of view. And I'm going to be specific about single point of view from the hero's point of view. And then a language barrier. So you probably know the book I'm talking about is Transcendence, okay? That was honestly the main reason why I didn't want to read this book, is because I thought, okay, we only have the hero's point of view, single point of view. We don't know what's happening with the heroine. And he can't even communicate with her. They don't speak the same language. Like, how am I going to get on board with this? How am I going to feel their romance? Like, how is this going to work? And so I just didn't read it because I'm like, I just don't see that working for me. I'm skeptical. I don't know that I can suspend my disbelief. And I was wrong. So Jesson asked me to read this book, and when I asked her to put together a TBR for me, and it was the last one I read because I'm like, I just don't think I'm gonna like it. and I ended up absolutely loving it. The ending in this book made me sob. It was absolutely beautiful. This love story was so completely compelling. They were so in love. This caveman hero and this girl from the future, like, this book sounds completely bonkers, but it was so absolutely beautiful. I adored it. I adored it so much. It was so beautiful. So this one completely worked for me, and I was surprised. I really was. I loved it. Okay, another trope that I really don't like, I don't know if this is necessarily a trope, something that comes up in books that I will avoid if I know that it is in a certain book, and that is a book, specifically a romance book, that is heavy on the action, that is like, they've got a lot of like fight scenes, or they've got a lot of like gunfights, you know, like stuff that would show up in maybe like a mafia type of romance, and I am talking about a mafia romance, but this is specifically books that are heavy on the action, because then I'm assuming that the romance is going to be lighter, and I just don't. I love a good plot that goes along with the romance, but something I really don't enjoy reading is fight scenes and battle sequences. Like, those just bore me to tears, honestly, so I don't want to read it in my romance. However, this book, Heavy Crown by Sophie Lark, this is the last book, the 6th book in the Brutal Birthright series. This is her mafia romance series. This book is very action heavy. This book has a lot of sort of those type of fights in here that happen that you would think would be in a mafia type of book or movie, but the romance in here was just equally beautiful and equally just sexy, and I just honestly loved it, and I felt like it was perfectly blended with the action, the plot of the mafia world, and the romance. It felt like it was perfectly blended and woven together. It didn't feel like one was heavier than the other. It was just a perfect blend, and no matter if that is like a fantasy romance, a paranormal romance, or a mafia romance, anything that has another world they're building along with the romance, I always am like, usually, often, it feels like one gets more attention than the other, and that's not the case with this one. This one felt completely well balanced. It was just beautiful. It was captivating. I loved and adored every second of it. This was a powerful conclusion to this series, and perfect setup for the Kingmaker series. So this book I really loved, and I was a little afraid that I wouldn't. So definitely love this one. 5-star book. I think all of the books that I've mentioned in here are probably 5 stars, maybe 4 stars. The first 3 that the first 4 that I've talked about so far have been 5-star reads, and they're all-time favorites. So let's talk about the next one. Okay, so the next trope that I actively avoid is any type of a religious taboo. Like, I don't want to read about that. I am a religious person. I'm a Christian, and I don't really want to read about that. Like, I really struggle with that. I feel like I'm always worried about how it's going to be handled, and I'm just like, I don't want something that I feel so strongly about to be treated lightly or anything like that, so this is something that I typically avoid. However, my opinion changed with Priest by Sierra Simone. I have been wanting to read this. I've had this book recommended to me for a really long time, and I've been very, very curious about it, because the way that people talk about this book, like, I feel like you get a lot of people who really focus on the heat of the book and how extremely high heat it is. But then you also have people who talk about, like, just how the characters are so great, and it's really about their journey. And so that's the part that intrigued me the most, is I was like, how is that gonna, how is the author gonna handle that? How is that gonna be handled with the religious topic in here? And this book blew me away. This is one of my favorite books of the year. I thought it was absolutely beautiful. I completely adored this love story, but the thing I loved the very most was following Father Bell's character journey. I thought it was just fantastic. I just felt so sympathetic with him. I just adored him, and I just loved this book. This book worked for me in every way. It was a 5 out of 5 star. I completely loved it, and now I am a huge devotee of Sierra Simone. This book was fantastic. Okay, and another thing that I will almost always avoid something that I don't really like reading about is, like, when you have, like, either like a stepbrother, stepsister type of romance, when you have, like, people who are not technically blood related, but they have a romance anyway, I'm just sort of like, eek, no, I don't want that. Like, I mean, I don't love reading things like that. Like, I don't love that. I don't ever really want to read something just for the shock value, no matter what genre that is, and I feel like a lot of times that's how that can come across, is just like, they're just out to shock you, and I'm just like, I'm not that type of reader. I want emotional connection, I want character development, I want a beautiful story, or something that's going to make me feel something that's not just like super squick and uncomfortable, you know? So anyway, this is something that I avoid, and And then also, this is also featuring the heroine in here is a teenager in the beginning, but it is Torn by Carrie Ann Cole. I was very, very nervous about this because she calls the hero her uncle. He's not her uncle. They're not related by blood, but he was there. There's a 15-year age gap. He was there as she was growing up, and it's their romance, and I really, really felt like, oh, I don't know about that. That could be a little too much for me, but it was so completely beautiful. I was sucked into the story. I couldn't put it down. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I adored this romance. It was so powerful and so lovely and so beautiful, and it didn't feel like yicky at all. Like, it was just perfect. I just wanted them to be together and be happy, and I love this book so much, and it's one of my favorite books of all time. It's perfect. This one was also recommended to me by Jess, and I'll say that every time because she got me to read some books that I didn't think that I would like that ended up being my all-time favorites. So this one, loved it so much. Okay, another trope that usually doesn't work for me, or that's something that I avoid, is a one-night stand romance. Like, I don't know, I feel like that trope is kind of done to death, and I feel like I've seen it done so many times, but I also feel like I don't love when relationships start like that when I'm reading about them in my romance. Like, I just don't. I love to see more of a slower build. I love to see them form a connection over years instead of just a one-night stand. However, this book absolutely blew my mind, changed my opinion of that, and it is Ruthless Stranger by Maggie Cole. This is a mafia romance. This is the first book in her Mafia Wars series. This is a little bit of an age gap. We have an older hero who I believe is in his 50s. I think he's in his 50s, and our heroine is like 40, 45, something like that. She's recently divorced. She goes to Vegas. She's kind of sad. Her girlfriends are like, go ahead and have a one-night stand. You know, we'll find you this guy and we'll, you know, make sure you're blindfolded so you never have to see him again. And Maxime, the hero, overhears this, and he sees Aspen, the heroine, and he's like, yeah, I volunteer as tribute, you know? Anyway, they have a wonderfully amazing night where they have this huge connection, and they can't stop thinking about each other, but they don't know what each other looks like, and then when they finally meet up again in the future, that connection is there just as powerful, and it was beautiful. I love this book so much. This is a one-night stand done perfectly, in my opinion, and it was so unique, so fun. I just adored it. So this one is another 5-star read for me. Okay, another book topic that I seriously go out of my way to avoid. Like, I know people love them. I know they're very popular. I have a really hard time with them, okay? I'm sorry. It's just, I don't know. Like, and it's monster romances. Like, I just don't love monster romances, y'all. Like, I'm sorry. It's something that is kind of hard for me to get behind. But this book was our group book for the Love in the Night paranormal romance readathon that we had, I think, in May, and it is Deal with the Demon. This is a very short novella. I was very skeptical of this, and literally the only reason that I even read it is because it was our group book, and it was very short, so I'm like, okay, I'll give it a try. I ended up loving this book. I thought it was so sweet. It was so cute. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. This is about a woman who is divorced. She's raising her 2 teenage children. She's extremely down on her luck. She just lost her job. She's stressed the heck out. She doesn't know how she's going to provide for her family. She ends up stumbling across this like QR code that says, scan me for like someone who's going to answer all your, you know, wishes, who's going to solve all your problems, basically. So on a whim, she scans it, and into her living room pops a literal demon with horns and all, and he is there to just make every wish of hers come true. And so she asks him, okay, I just need you to take care of the kids so I can try and find a job. And he does, and he ends up being like this sweet cinnamon roll demon hero who takes care of her kids, makes her literal cinnamon rolls, and it's just so sweet. And then he, of course, gets feelings for her. Like, honestly, this book changed my mind about monster romances because I thought it was adorable. It was very fun. I just loved it, and I was surprised. I was surprised that I did. It was very fun, very enjoyable. Okay, now this trope is one that I definitely avoid. Like, I hate this trope. I don't want to read it. I don't want to read about this in my fiction. I don't want it in any way, and that is cheating. I hate it. I just don't like it. I just, no, I don't want it. I ain't got no time for this, you know? So, however, I heard Jess years ago from Peace Love Books talk about this series by Candy Steiner, and I was very intrigued because she's like, it's high angst, and I'm like, did you say angst? Because I love angst. And it is What He Doesn't Know. This book does have cheating in it as a main plot, and it does have a love triangle in it too, which people usually don't like. But this is the story about a married couple. This is actually a duet to get the full story. You need to read both books. But this is about a married couple who have lost a pregnancy and they're mourning that. I don't remember if it was miscarriage or if it was stillborn, but trigger warnings for those. And they're mourning and grieving, and they are really, really struggling with that death, and they are having a very difficult time connecting about that. And the husband specifically is really pushing the wife away, and she is just about at her wit's end. She's a teacher at a school. She's a kindergarten teacher, and suddenly this man comes into work at her school, and he is actually like her high school boyfriend. They used to be in love, and he is still in love with her. He still has feelings for her. So this is a very complicated, very angsty, definitely has cheating as a main trope in here about this romance, and it's all about, is she going to make things work with her husband, or is she going to move on with this new past love? And it was heartbreaking, but I loved it, and I felt like this is the only book I have ever read where I felt like the cheating was a crucial part of the plot, and I also felt like, even though it's never okay, I was also sort of like, I could see how that could happen. I really liked this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I felt like this is just a beautifully angsty love story. Okay, another topic or trope. Some of these aren't necessarily tropes, they're just things in books I don't like. So this one is novellas. I'm not a huge fan of novellas, honestly. I don't really like them. I almost always feel unsatisfied. I feel disappointed in the end, and it feels like a waste of time. I just don't like novellas. I would rather take a longer time to read a longer book and feel satisfied at the end than I would by reading a novella and feeling disappointed. However, this novella was super satisfying to me. I really enjoyed it, and it is Daddy Crush by A. Anders. This is a very short novella. This is an age gap romance. These two are neighbors. The hero is older than the heroine, and it is just a beautifully sweet and steamy romance, and I really loved it. And I think the thing that made this work for me so well is that they had such a clear emotional connection that carried through the whole book, and the hero was like, he was so worried that like she wasn't gonna like him, and it was just like, he was such a sweet alpha mellow hero. He is a complete alpha mellow hero. I loved him. I thought this novella was great. I gave this one 4 stars. Speaking of cinnamon roll heroes, that's also a trope that I don't really love. I don't necessarily love a cinnamon roll hero. I want them to be a little bit alpha at least. I love alpha mellows and I love alpha heroes. Cinnamon roll heroes can be a harder sell for me. However, this book, The Duke Who Didn't by Courtney Milan, has one of my favorite cinnamon roll heroes who is so sweet, so completely gone for the heroine, and he is just a pile of goo and sweetness, even though he's kind of a bit of a dummy in here for how he goes about trying to win the heroine. He is the Duke. Nobody knows he's the Duke. He's been in love with her since they were children. He comes back to town. She's kind of miffed that he left town without telling her, and he asks her to help him find a wife, and he gives her a list of all of the attributes he wants in a wife, and they're all attributes that she has. This book was so sweet. I really enjoyed it, and it was a cinnamon roll hero who worked for me. So, there we have it. There are the books that I love with tropes that I hate. If you've made it this far, please leave me a heart emoji down below. Thank you so much for watching, my friends. I'll see you in my next video.